50th anniversary of IDEA. But what I want you all to understand is that that 50th anniversary isn't quite as significant as what is essentially the 55th anniversary of Washington State's own mandatory special education law. A little story. It was the summer of 1970. Katie's son, Patrick, was still sitting in the back room rocking in his wheelchair because the Seattle School District said, "We didn't want your kind here." Janet's daughter, Nada, same story. Evelyn's son, Coolidge, same story. Children who experienced disabilities were routinely denied access to public education as recently as 1970. I see some gray hair in the gallery here. Many of you were alive then. Certainly your parents were alive then. Many of your siblings were told they couldn't go to school. In 1970, I was in the midst of a law school career. Do you know that as recently as that, no state in the United States, no state in the United States mandated children with disabilities attending public education, and 13 states prohibited their attendance in public education because, and I quote, they were afflicted with loathsome and contagious diseases. The statutory reference to imbeciles, idiots, and feeble-minded, things that send shivers down my spine to even say today, but that was the reality of life for individuals with disabilities just 50 years ago. Those four parents, those three parents and one other parent, Cecile Lindquist, came together having worked to establish some church basement schools for their children because nobody else would do it, and decided they were going to change the world. They connected with two law students at the University of Washington Law School. I was one of them. To write a law that established the right for all children in the state of Washington to receive public education. All children. Their group was called Education for All, after Article 2, Section 9 of the Washington State Constitution. And they wrote a law called Education for All. I happen to be one of the scriveners, but I take great pride in the fact that I simply followed the directions of my four moms, as I subsequently came to call them. What an incredible four group of women who simply did not understand that you couldn't do this. You couldn't go out and write a law establishing a major civil right for individuals who experience disabilities. The first time those individuals had been acknowledged as a discrete group of people subject to discrimination. Those children were routinely institutionalized at that point. Put them over here, forget about them, don't worry about it. We'll take care of them. Terribly, horribly discriminated against. This wasn't a law that was written by educators. This was a law that was opposed by educators. It was a law that mandated all children in attendance at public schools with appropriate educational programs that were directed to their unique needs and abilities, and established funding requirements, and mandated the superintendent of public instruction to impose sanctions at school districts that continued to discriminate and eliminate those children who experience disabilities. It was the precursor, and in fact, one of the two foundations of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which I would note that when it was passed in 1975 was called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, because a United States senator came to us in Washington State and asked if he could use the name of our law for the name of the federal law. It wasn't until 1990 that the Education of All Handicapped Children Act was changed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the law we celebrate today. The significant point here is that we must learn from the history. We must learn from what these four moms did, because history is useless if we don't learn from it. If we don't understand the power that we have as parents and advocates for children who experience disabilities, the power to change the educational world. Never before had parents been given a right to be involved in the planning of their children's education. The ability to challenge the district authority, the ability to challenge the gobbledygook that we get from the professionals in the educational field, the language that we can't understand, and perhaps they can't either. This law provided parents with that authority to both say, no, that's not my child. That's not how my child learned. My child learns this way. This is how you have to deal with Coolidge, with Patrick, with Nada. If you approach them with competence and compassion and caring and understanding, they can learn. Oh my God. Because at that time, it was not understood in the United States that children with disabilities could learn. And in particularly, it was not understood in the educational environment and in the educational structure. Again, what's the use of history if we don't learn from it? What's the use of understanding what Katie and Evelyn and Janet and Cecile did if we don't take that lesson to heart and say, gee, four ladies with two very young and inexperienced law students and no budget, a Volkswagen bus that went from educational meeting to educational meeting all across the state, carrying 2, 3, 4, or 6 of us with our little dog and pony show saying to the superintendents, the then special ed directors, the teachers, the educational authority, our children can learn. Our children have a right to education. They committed and they made a change that we still celebrate today. Now I ask you, parents, grandparents, advocates, are we done? Is everything wonderful? Can we simply sit back now and say, well, there's a law. We don't need to do anything more. There's a law. We've got funding. Do you know how much more funding there is available in special education today than there was in 1970? It's an astonishing figure. Do you also know how many more mid-level administrators there are today than there were in 1970? Do you know how many, this is important, how many more trained classroom teachers in both regular and special education that welcome our kids into school? How many more are there today? If you don't know that, your advocacy is failing. If you don't know the difference between then and now, you need to get busy. We have a wonderful foundation, 55 years in Washington, 50 years nationally, to work with. We have a law that is actually an extraordinarily good law. It focuses on how we educate children, not the specific education of each child. It gives us the opportunity to be advocates, not just on the microcosmic level for each of our individual kids. That's incredibly important, and every one of us has to commit to that. But equally important, how we become advocates for all of our kids. And here, I want to emphasize the word all, because we need to be talking not just about how we advocate for those children with IDD or with vision impairments or with hearing impairments or who are users of wheelchairs for mobility. We need to be talking about them, but we need to be talking about all of our children and how they learn together. Because if we don't include all children, then all we're doing is teaching our children who experience disabilities how to function in a segregated society when they leave school. So let's truly take the history lesson of education for all to heart. The lesson number one is that parents can do remarkable things if they commit to doing it. You have leadership. Kathy, Stacy, all of them. You have leadership that can help you, that can give you guidance. But lesson one is that commitment for both your children and all of the children has to be realized. And secondly, let's take the lesson of the name, Education for All, because we need to change the direction of what we're doing. We need to stop focusing on special education versus regular or typical education. And we need to bring those two together, and we need to do it at the very basic dollar level, protecting the dollars for all children and focusing on what each of them need. And yes, maybe this is radical, but isn't it the lesson of history? Isn't it the way that we really change what's going on for adults who experience disability in our society? Because if we don't help them learn how to function in the typical society, then we're not really doing much for them, are we? So that's the lesson of history. Number one, that it is possible to do this. Katie, Evelyn, Janet, Cecile, they've all passed now. Janet just a couple of years ago. I'm in the challenging position of being the only one left out of the Education for All group. But it doesn't mean I stop. It means I'm standing here, or sitting here as the case may be, still railing about being an advocate. There are no special education policemen. You hear everything about the federal government closing the Department of Ed. Oh, woe is me. They're going to close the department. Well, darn it. They weren't your policemen anyways. You are the special education policeman. If you don't do it, nobody else will. So focus on your kids first, then focus on all the kids next. That's the lesson of history. A, you can do it, and B, there is a focus towards which you can move. Now, that's enough of my preaching to the choir here. I know you're all here because you are committed to this goal. But I really want you to see it in perspective. How far we have come. 13 states that said, go away, we don't even want you. Language that was awful, no other way to say it, to today, where we have a foundation, we have the ability, we have, I hope, the commitment and direction. Thank you all for listening to me pontificate. I appreciate your time this morning.